Welcome back, everyone, to another day in the life of a military wife. And today I want to kind of address a couple of questions I've just been getting in general from people inside and outside of the military community, because there's been a little bit of confusion based on what's going on in the news and in Europe and that whole area. And that is in regards to two aspects of things that have been in the news recently, and that is conscription. And what is the difference between conscription and a draft and all of that. And the Abraham Accords, which just had a huge summit in revolving around that. So anyway, we're going to talk about both of those things today because those are things that I'm interested in and you've been asking questions about. So let's dig on in. I am your host, Sam Wolf, and you're listening to Life of a Military Wife. All right, so let's talk about this. As I've mentioned previously, way before I was a military spouse and before I got my degree in family life science, I was a political science major. And I studied and I went to a school that emphasized international studies and government, understanding different governments, competed in Model UN. Anyway, I specialize specifically in international law. So I like really learning about peace treaties and things like that. And so that's why all of this stuff interests me, and it's helped as a military wife because it's given me a foundation to understand what's going on in the world. And we're going to start with the whole conscription thing. So it's blown everyone's mind with the whole situation in Ukraine and Russia, why things have gone the way they have. And I couldn't find the exact quote. Maybe I will, and I'll be able to put it in the description by the time this, is published or, uploaded. But one of the United States generals said that conscripts were actually worse than volunteers. They were more likely to die. They just weren't as good of quality of soldier. And that is something you can actually see throughout history. When people choose to join the military of any country at any point of history, they tend to be more devoted and they tend to have better follow through because they want to learn, they want to acquire that training, they want to succeed. People who are forced in tend to not do as well. And Russia has for a long time, and most of its history, if not all, had conscription. They've had volunteers too, but conscription is a huge part of their history. The Ukrainian military, on the other hand, has all been largely volunteers. Now there is conscription going on because of the situation on the ground. And that got me kind of wanting to know a little bit more, because I knew that there were certain countries that had conscription, like North Korea and Russia. And technically the United States draft, were it in effect, would be considered conscription. And a lot of people don't realize that a draft really is conscription, but we don't have an active draft right now. So technically we don't have conscription in the United States. We have a volunteer military as of right now. However, the draft is still on the books. And as I spoke earlier, a while back, there was a law trying to add women to the draft. So we still have the draft technically around. Men still have to register for selective service, but it's not currently in place right now. And because of that, I wanted to cover something that I ran into that I found interesting. I did not realize, and I probably should have, that there were countries that currently draft women. I knew Israel did. However, women can get a waiver. But there are other countries that currently draft women or have conscription of women. And that's Bolivia, Chad, Israel, Mozambique, Norway, North Korea, and Sweden. And Norway introduced their female conscription in 2015. They are the first member of NATO to have legal compulsory national service for both men and women. And that was surprising to me. The fact that Sweden was also on there, they introduced female conscription in 2010, but it wasn't activated until 2017. And it's the second, because Norway was the first, but it was the second European country to enact a female conscription. Israel's had it for a while, but again, they have an exemption, and about a third of Israeli women do exempt out of military service. So it's been, again, as I've looked through and was just looking at some of this information, I found it rather interesting. And again, there has been times where people have tried to add women to the draft here in the United States. So that is not an unusual concept, even here in the United States, to think that women should be part of our draft system. Now, again, like I said, because our draft is currently inactive, we don't currently have conscription. It's all voluntary. But countries that do currently have conscription are Algeria, Angola, Armenia, Austria, Azerbaijan. Although in Austria's defense, they have alternatives to service available. Bolivia has it, Brazil has it, but most people are volunteers. Chile, Colombia, Cuba, Cyprus, Denmark, Egypt, and this is the one Irita. I have a hard time saying that country's name. Estonia, Finland, Greece, Iran, Israel, North Korea, South Korea, Kuwait, Libya, Lithuania, Mexico, Moldova, Morocco, Mozambique, Myanmar. Although there is conflict on whether or not that's the case, there's some lack of clarity there. Norway, Qatar, China, Singapore, Sweden, Switzerland, Tunisia, Turkey, the UAE, United Arab Emirates, Ukraine, and Venezuela. And all of those currently have conscription in some level. Some of those countries do offer waivers and exemptions, but some of them, it's a crime and there is no way out, and you actually have to flee the country if you don't want to serve in their militaries. So that is just, there's actually quite a few, because I saw a lot of statements about, I thought conscription was gone and it's so evil of Russia to still do this and that's barbaric. And then when the Ukraine had to institute it too, they were like, that's just horrible, blah, blah, blah. And I saw people making these comments online and I'm like, peeps, you do realize that our draft is technically conscription. Yes, it's not currently being used, but we've done it ourselves. And there's quite a few countries that are still doing it, including our allies, and some of them even conscript women. So you might want to back that up before you start making wholesale claims like that. We in the United States don't need that. Even though Russia does have conscription, less than 20% of its military, according to what we're being told. Again, all of these facts are, meh. Not everyone is completely upfront with all of their military details. I wonder why, national security. But from the best that we know, less than 20% of the Russian military are conscripted. Most of the Russian military are volunteers. China does technically have a conscription. Like I said, I was reading that and I said China does technically, but it's not currently active, just like ours isn't currently active, because China is able to, as of right now, get enough volunteers for its military that it didn't actually need to use the conscription at this moment. But it's still on the books. It can, just like we could as the United States. So the fact that we do technically have conscription on our books as a possibility, It's kind of, we probably shouldn't be throwing stones at countries that conscript people, because we technically have it legal in our country as well. So, I still personally feel that a volunteer army is the best way to go, because again, those people are committed. It was their choice. And you're going to get, when it's your choice, you just tend to be more, interested in improving yourself and bettering yourself and doing the job well. So, that was just a confusion I had seen online and I had gotten questions about. Just a point of clarification I wanted to make in regards of conscription. And like I said, in the process, I realized that Norway and Sweden conscript women, which I had no idea that was a thing. So I really honestly had thought that it was only North Korea and Israel that conscripted women, because that was the only two countries I had previously been aware of. So that's just, something I wanted to share with you, just in case you were also a little confused by what was being said. The next thing that has been in the news lately, as of this last week, there was a summit in Israel involving the Abraham Accords. And again, because of my interest in international law and treaties and whatnot, I have been well aware of the Abraham Accords ever since they were originally signed in 2020. But I'm surprised that it was a little surprising to find out that there are people who hadn't heard of the Abraham Accords. So a lot of people, I feel, or at least I feel a lot of people had heard of the Camp David Peace Accord. That happened back in the 90s under President Clinton. But the Abraham Accords were facilitated by the United States, but the United States is not technically an active signatory on them. Basically, what the United States State Department did was facilitated an agreement between Israel and other Middle Eastern nations near them, i.e., Bahrain, Morocco, and UAE. And Sudan, I believe, was also involved. And this is huge because a lot of these countries had never come to the table with the Israelis previously to the Abraham Accords. And so when the Abraham Accords were signed and I want to make sure I get my dates correct, but when they were signed in August 13th of 2020, then they were, and I think it was finalized the 15th of September 2020. So they were working on it during that period. It was a huge deal. It was a huge deal because getting these countries all to agree to work together and support each other, national security and sovereignty, as a big deal in the Middle East, probably for reasons y'all understand. But not everyone understands exactly what led to this happening. So previously, most of the Middle Eastern countries have been relatively unified in their perspectives in the region. However, with some of the situations and political and governmental pursuits of Iran have made their neighboring countries very uncomfortable in the last several years. And due to growing unease on the part of the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and some of these other countries, they have come to the realization that it would be advantageous to work with Israel for the sake of security. And going to the State Department's page, they actually have some very specific things. And I loved one of the lines in particularly: we pursue a vision of peace, security, and prosperity in the Middle East and around the world. And that's one of the goals of the Abraham Accords. So anyway, as I was talking about it, they just had a summit. So they all got together to kind of, talk through the Abraham Accords, see how it's all going. And that happened in Israel. And this is groundbreaking because this is the first time that this kind of thing, that 4 Arab foreign ministers of state were hosted by Israel, all at the same time. And it was just really, it's such a wonderful progress for the region to see this kind of unity, this kind of diplomacy happening. I have a lot of hope for these countries. If they can continue to work together in this way, it will really strengthen that part of the region. And it's great. I feel like it's a good idea because, yes, the United States helped facilitate this coming about, but the United States was a facilitator. The agreements are not between the United States and these countries. They are between the countries themselves. And facilitating agreements between countries is a wonderful opportunity for us to help people come to the table and work things through. But the United States doesn't always have to be the enforcer. We don't always have to be the one to make sure things happen. And if we can be, kind of the telephone connector. This was the way I had someone explain it to me before, that when you put yourself in the middle and make yourself the go-between, then the agreements don't work without you. And that puts a lot of extra strain on the person in the middle, the negotiator. But if you can just be the telephone man and just connect the lines of communication and step back, then you don't have to be the one maintaining all of that. And there is so many countries in this world that we would like to get along. We would like to work together, but we cannot always be the negotiator. We cannot always be the, babysitter or the helicopter parent making sure that they don't fight. And if we can help them understand that they have mutually inclusive goals, and then sit back and let them work towards those goals with our encouragement, but on their own, they are going to be more successful because they're going to own it. It's going to be their responsibility. And I'm so excited. I really do love the fact that the Abraham Accords are working, that they are meeting. This summit is a huge step forward for them and showing that it's not just a one-time thing where they got to the table and agreed on something, but that they are truly maintaining it. So that is what happened. The summit took place. I want to make sure I'm getting my dates properly said, but the summit took place March 27th and 28th in Israel. So the United States did send the Secretary of State to be there as our representative, but like I said, we're just kind of bystanders, and that's a great place for us to be. It's wonderful to see these countries working through things together. So again, it made me happy. I'm glad to see that the Abraham Accords are working. So those are 2 topics that I wanted to just kind of give you a little bit of background on in case you hadn't heard of them or didn't completely understand them. And that was what I wanted to cover. I just finished up the resiliency class this last week that I taught with Maria Strange. It went really well. I'm really excited. We are talking about doing more collaboration in the future. And I'm also branching out to do public speaking events to kind of teach some of these concepts about self-care and just military life in general. So I'm hoping to launch a website to help facilitate all of that in the coming months. So look forward to that. All of that said, I am really grateful for the feedback I'm getting from everyone. It helps me know what content to produce to help you. And that's the whole goal of this podcast, is to help my listeners better understand the military community or better navigate the military community if they are part of it. I am your host, Sam Wolf, and thank you for listening to Life of a Military Wife.